All right, Kate, we are on and it's ready when you are.
Okay, we can do a round of introductions. So I'll go first and then I'll hand it off to Robert. And then I think Robert, I'll have you maybe, well, I can see some of the names online too. So I'll start and then we'll just popcorn and make sure everybody's covered. But
Oh, good.
my name is Kate Strathy and I'm HRC Commissioner for Board 1 and my pronouns are she, her. And I'll hand it off to Robert and maybe we can go around the room first and then go online.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Marshall. I'm the Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission and a member of the Community Engagement Committee. I will pass off to our guest.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Mary Ann Bradshaw. I am a professor at Western Oregon University. On your agenda this evening to talk about the community belonging or the sense of community survey. I live in Ward 4 and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Celine. I'm one of the commissioners. I'm like out of breath. But I'm here.
We're glad you're here. It's good to see you. And my name is Gretchen Bennett and I use she, her pronouns and I'm the staff liaison to HRC. And Judy.
I'm Judy McCord. I am one of the commissioners of the Human Rights Commission. I can never remember what ward I'm in, so.
And
Christina Ballard. Christina Ballard, she, her pronouns. I'm on the HRC and I'm in Ward 7.
Very good, Kate. I think that's everybody.
Yeah, I think so. So next on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment? I don't think so.
None received. And other than Mary Ann, who's on the agenda, we do not have members of the public in the room today.
Yeah, unless Mary Ann just really wants to take the floor on that one, but that's okay.
I'll hold back for the moment.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm toggling between screens. 1 second. So next on the agenda is approval of minutes, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, great. Making sure you can hear me. So I make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which I think was December. Is that right?
Yes, December 9th.
Okay.
It's been a hot minute.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Robert. What is the next step, Gretchen?
Yeah, your next step would be to invite discussion, and if there is none, you can call for a vote.
Okay. Any discussion on approving the minutes? Celine, you're laughing. Any discussion? Approved. All right, all good. Moving forward. And so let's call it a vote. Everybody approve. I'm not great at Robert's Rules of Order, okay? Robert's in the room. he's probably better at Rules of Order. All right, so let's vote and I will look online. If you could do thumbs up. I am virtually doing a thumbs up. Gretchen, if you could just take a tally, it'd be great.
Yep.
Okay.
Your committee members unanimously supported it.
Perfect. Minutes approved.
Kate, you're muted.
Yep, I'm looking at the agenda. So next is the calendar. Is that right?
Oh, what we have next is the survey. So we can jump into the actual survey questions and then the partner outreach and information sessions we want to do.
Okay, perfect. So Mary Ann, Gretchen and I met recently just to go over a couple of questions. And so we, I think, Mary Ann, we were not very specific and not very helpful for you, but we kind of narrowed things down a little bit. So we'll let you take the floor and just basically go over how we can be of value to your class and how we can improve on the survey this year. But I think we basically, if I can summarize, we looked at some areas where we could trim the survey, how we can make it more about belonging, and then think about the language. And I'm glad Judy is on because she's expert on language. So that's really helpful as well. So Mary Ann, if you want to kick it off.
Sure, yeah. And the conversation Caitlin, that you, Gretchen, and I had was really helpful to me. And I feel like, sometimes it's really easy when you're working on a questionnaire to get so focused on like the niggle within each question and the wording and the options, the answer options, but having the big picture conversation, like how does the survey fit into the Human Rights Commission and the Community Engagement Committee's work and efforts, and making sure that we're asking questions that advance the work that you are doing and that will gather data that will contribute to decisions you are supporting. So just a little bit of context, Christine and Judy, I don't know if you kind of know very much about this survey. Maybe I'll just give the 60-second. Awesome. Okay, so I teach a class at Western Oregon in the Master of Organizational Leadership program, and we have partnered with the Human Rights Commission the last couple of years to do like an experiential class project. The class is called Data-Driven Decision Making. And instead of just talking about case studies or principles of gathering data to make good decisions, I'm kind of a let's go do something and have your like students' time, effort, energy, and brilliance contribute to an organization that's looking for data. So the students and I kind of come to you as a consulting team almost and say, what information are you looking for that can help guide decisions? They do some secondary research, they do some guided qualitative conversations with their friends and family members, but really the heart of it is that they partner with you to field a quantitative survey and then analyze it and bring those findings back to you, do a presentation, welcome your questions, comments, discussion. So the survey that you're looking at is built on a survey that we've done in past years. Keeping the survey similar serves us in some ways because there's some opportunity to compare and learn from past surveys. We also have fielded it not only in English, but also Spanish, Chuukese, and Marshallese. And so questions that were like, hey, let's just leave that question exactly how we asked it, then we've already got the translations in place. Obviously, if the question is not native this year, or there's something else that's more valuable, or there's been, an answer option we need to add, like, I don't want to keep a question the same just to keep the question the same. But if we're like, hey, it's 6 this way and half dozen the other, let's keep it the same. We started a couple of years ago calling it a discrimination survey. And a lot of the questions are around experiencing discrimination. And last year, we wanted to really focus more on the positive and call it a belonging survey, but found that some of the respondents, when we talked about like, do you belong in Salem, that instead of answering, because we do some of them in person where we have conversations with people, that they were like, well, I was born here, I've lived here all my life, like I do belong here, even though they don't feel a sense of belonging. So I've used the phrase sense of community because that's a phrase that seems to be more meaningful than do you belong here? Like, do you feel a sense of community? And there is a big like sense of community index. That's a 24 question battery that's been used in a lot of academic settings to compare that sense of community among different subgroups. So that's where that sense of community phrase has come from. Judy, I see your hand.
Yes, so as we go through this, can you let us know if the questions are changing, or I mean, if they can be changed, or if we need to keep them the same?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
And I'll flag those as I go. There is not anything that has to stay the same.
Okay.
But for example, Q1 that has no highlights, that is presented on this questionnaire exactly as it was asked last year. What is your age with those answer options? Q2, if you look, and stop me if you have comments, questions, input. We've asked Q1 and Q2 first as screener questions. So if a minor is answering, we say, hey, thanks so much. But 16, 15, under 18, we just say, thanks so much for coming on and being willing, you're done. Q2, we ask, do you currently live or work in Salem, Oregon? Obviously, there's a yes, I do. A no, I don't. In past years, we have welcomed people to say, no, I don't live or work in Salem, but I'm very close, less than 20 miles away. People who, live in Monmouth or live in Woodburn can still come into Salem and shop and work and may have very helpful responses about experiencing discrimination in Salem. My question for you on this particular question is, do we want to continue to have respondents who don't live in Salem but live near Salem to do the full survey, as we're now focusing less on experiencing discrimination here and more on feeling a sense of community here? I don't know that it's realistic to expect people who live in Dallas or live in Almsville to feel a sense of community in Salem. In 2024, that was 8% of the respondents who didn't actually live in Salem or work in Salem, but were nearby. I don't know if people have a sense on that. Do we want respondents to be Salem residents or Salem, like people who live or work in Salem? Or are we okay to have people in the next 20 miles away group? Christina?
Yeah, this may be too much in the weeds, but what if somebody works for a business based in Salem, but they work remotely?
And that's really important, because the last thing we want is somebody to look at the answer options and say, hey, wait, I don't know what to mark. The textbooks, I'll say with a survey, you want your answer options to be mutually exclusive, meaning I can mark only one, and exhaustive, meaning there is an answer option that fits everybody in every circumstance. So we would definitely want to, if we're saying, if you live or work in Salem, we may need to clarify work for a Salem-based company. We could say I live in Salem, I work, we could think through it, but we would want it to be exhaustive, to include people who live or work in Salem, as long as, I mean, someone can work for a Salem-based company and live in Medford or live in Vermont. I mean, so I don't know that someone who lived in Vermont would be very likely to come across the survey.
But also, I think it would also play into how realistic is it that they would necessarily feel a sense of community in Salem. I mean, if they're working remotely outside of the city of Salem and everything, I mean, do they have a reasonable expectation to feel a sense of community in the city of Salem?
All right.
So
I know Kate has her hand up. Maybe it's, do you live or spend time in Salem? Maybe it's that, just simply. I don't know.
Because you could do all your activities in Salem, but not
Yes.
have a job. Like if
You
you're a
come in
college
to
student or
shop and
something.
go to school,
So you don't technically live here, but you go to school here. So
go to Willamette or Chemeketa, or do you live or spend time in Salem?
Yeah, that's what's dawning on me. That's kind of what we're trying to figure
It
out.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's more, I mean, yeah, because you can technically work in Salem remotely, but never come to Salem.
right.
So
Yep.
wouldn't want to skew, because those people obviously would be less likely to feel a sense of community, so.
we've got Kate.
Kate,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I like the and spend time in Salem, but I wanted to say that I do think this is an important question, because if you were to ask somebody from like Grants Pass or Roseburg or Medford how they believe like there's a sense of community in Portland, they're going to have a very different perspective than somebody in Portland, because they're not living there, right? Like if you're in Alberta district versus downtown Portland, those are different communities. So I think it is important to spend time or live in Salem itself, and not necessarily open it up to people who are outside of that range. But if people are, for example, if they're like dating somebody in Salem, so they're here all the time on the weekends, that's another thing, but that's not work and they might not live here. So I think spending time is a good way to say it too.
Great. So I'm hearing, do you currently live or spend time in Salem? And then we have the people who say yes, continue with the survey. People even who live within 20 miles this year, I would just have the yes or the no. I don't think we need a nearby and, okay. But the nearby people then would not continue with the survey.
Unless
they spend time.
Check, right.
Right, they have to say I live or spend
Or
time.
spend time, they
Yeah.
might spend time.
If they live or spend time in Monmouth, or they live or spend time in Woodburn, or
Yeah.
something, like, we'll be like, okay, cool, go do their survey.
Yeah.
Okay, great, helpful. This section is all highlighted in yellow because it's new. Last year we had a single question around, do you belong in Salem? Do you feel that you belong in Salem? And this is adding, so if you're looking ahead, you can see in past years, we've included a definition of discrimination and a definition of bias crime. This first definition is new, but we're saying for this survey, we'll use the following definition. And it's a definition of sense of community, a feeling that members have of belonging, a feeling that members are able to move about their lives without discrimination, and a shared belief that members' needs will be met through the community. I did mark in green a question. So the yellow highlights are like proposed wordings, and the green highlights are, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Members is like the definition, the word used in the sense of community definition you'll find online. And you might have you're a member of a class or member of a club or member of some community where maybe there's actually a joining process. Where we're talking about Salem as a community, one thing that crossed my mind is perhaps we would want to change that word to residents. I do think we talk about members of community, members of the Salem community. I'm totally fine to leave it at members. I don't want someone to say, oh, those are citizens or those are members that have somehow like become official. If there's some process to be a member of community, in my mind, the sense of community here is you live here. Do you reside here? Do you have this sense of community as part of living or spending time here? Thoughts or comments on the definition, reactions to members versus residents?
I think Kate put her hand down, so I think it's Judy.
Oh, Judy.
So, we've already established that they live and spend time here, correct?
Yep.
So do we need to say residents or members at all? Could we, because we're talking to them, could we say, is it a feeling that you have a belonging? Can we address it as you instead of to make it a little more personal?
Yeah, it doesn't feel as definitional.
No.
Yeah.
I guess I don't.
I had a similar thought of,
Definition.
but not using the word you, but saying senses of community is a feeling
Of belonging.
exactly of belonging, a feeling of being able to move about their lives. I was thinking about you could just kind of delete
Yeah,
the noun
just
part.
streamline it a little bit.
But I feel like I jumped ahead of Christina. I'm sorry, Christina.
That's okay. A feeling of belonging. What about feeling welcomed into the community?
Mm-hmm.
I guess
Yeah.
belonging implies there's sort of grouping, I guess, in my mind. And trying to figure out how to word this correctly. Like there's something to belong to, but
Of being
that seems
welcome.
like that seems like there could be a barrier. If you're feeling welcomed, you can just kind of move into it rather than having to choose to belong. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Judy?
So I might need to see the rest of their survey before I get back to this, but I don't really like the section about moving about their lives without discrimination because we do have several community members that would feel discriminated against, but also feel a sense of belonging. So I don't want to define that necessarily at the beginning, just because I think that that might eliminate some people's thought process as they go through their survey. So I'm thinking maybe we could see the rest of their survey and come back to this question.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Should we keep going and circle back to the definition? Sure. Okay. But I do want to highlight the other pieces in yellow here. So the four statements that are labeled A, B, C, D are agree, disagree statements. So that I feel a sense of community in Salem, then is kind of our overall rating, which for those of you who participated in past years, we had kind of an overall rating for the level of discrimination. And this year, kind of the overall rating would be more here with this sense of community. And the challenge with something like that, you know, as you just pointed out, Christina, is that, or I think it was Judy, sorry, it's a multifaceted where we're saying the definition is these multiple parts. Now we're saying overall, do you feel a sense of community? But then to have the other statements that allow somebody to say yes here, but no there. So if we have a multi-part definition, we could almost use those ABCD statements to take out each part of what makes up community, that sense of community. I pulled some of these statements from other surveys. Sometimes it's nice to have a benchmark, like in this group or in this is kind of how people responded to that. But just the overall is A. B, I experience Salem as a vibrant community that is welcoming to all. That is language borrowed from the city of Salem, kind of mission vision statement. C, when I'm out and about in Salem, I feel secure being my authentic self. And D, if I were in trouble in a public space, I think someone would help me. So not using the word safety in these, but having the vibrant community welcoming to all in general, and then something specific about me, and a very concrete, if I were in trouble, I think someone would help me. And then those four, and we can add, subtract, swap one out, change those. These are new this year. I kind of come to you today to say, let's have a conversation about these, but I don't want to finalize this section until the students are able to also weigh in. So my ideal in the next week or two would be to say the rest of the survey we feel good enough about to finalize the translations and get some of those pieces in. My first class meeting is April 2nd, and we're hoping to be in field by the 21st. So it'd be a pretty quick turnaround. But if we have input and a general sense of direction and like this, maybe there's space for the students to add one and bring some of their thoughts. So looking for input on here, not necessarily looking finalized. But then Q4 and Q5 are open ends, marked as optional. But you know, just type in, share a comment, share a thought, what increases your sense of community in Salem, and then what decreases your sense of community in Salem. And the students have done a really great job in past years taking what people type in and pulling some key quotes that really you know, show the themes that people typed in and coding like, hey, X% said something in this theme and Y% made a comment about this theme. And you know, some people look at those open ends and leave them blank. Some people type 2 words, some people type an essay. But I do think that the open end comments have been helpful in past years. Yeah, Judy.
I would just like to suggest a question about somebody's neighborhood. Do they feel comfortable in their neighborhood, or do they feel safe in their neighborhood? I don't know if that would be a consideration or not.
We talked about that a little bit, Judy, when Marianne and Gretchen and I met. And one thing that came up was, how do we kind of stay away in the survey from all the discussions happening with like the city right now and funding and the levies and public safety bonds versus livability bonds, and we want to add value for our commission and then also city council, but we don't want any we want to be really careful with the wording to make sure that there's I want to be careful with the wording, but like it can't be used in any sort of political rhetoric in any way from anyone. So like for me, for example, when I think of safety, I think of like how could that question then be used to justify more spending for certain budgets, right? And so we just really want to be careful that there's no like unintended consequences this year. and that we're really, really thoughtful in the way we phrase things. So if there's a good way to phrase that, that maybe doesn't even use the word safety, then that would work, but we're really thoughtful this time. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, Gretchen, if you have anything to add.
No, I think that made sense. Thank you, Kate.
The other thing I'll add is that when you look at the sense of community body of research, there's a lot of discussion about actually defining the community. And so I'm a little concerned if we're talking about community as Salem, to then say, now on this question, we want to think about your neighborhood. And I feel like we probably want to just have community throughout the survey refer to the same community and not your neighborhood, or not your church community, or your kids' school community, or your school community, or your work community,
Sure.
because there are so many communities and layers. So I think we had talked about a neighborhood question. I kind of shy away from that just because I think it could get a little muddy.
Sure, that makes sense. I gotta say, I love question C. I think that's fantastic.
Well, and Gretchen, Kate, and I kind of talked about like, how do we get at that, like, security and not safety? But that was kind of what I landed on after we talked.
Yeah,
So
I like it too.
good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna move on into the discrimination
Christina's got it.
sections. Oh, great, Christina, hand.
In the same vein of thinking, on D, how about if I needed help in a public space rather than if I were in trouble in a public space?
I'm just weighing in my mind, if I were in trouble, meaning my car broke down and I don't feel safe. I need help, meaning I've got too many bags of groceries, or I have I don't know. It definitely is, I think if I need help, sometimes I don't expect that someone would. It doesn't have the same urgency, which is okay. This wording is from a different questionnaire. So if we wanted the benchmark, we need to leave it this way. Does the group like it if I needed help in a public space? I think someone would help me. Gentler.
I think certain areas of the city are more public facing than others, like some are more residential, like
Yeah.
if you're, say, downtown, you might see more people than if you're like in the woods.
Definitely.
So I don't know if adding help like may alter how people answer depending on, especially if they don't live in Salem, like, but they spend time here. So I just don't know if we want to change it. Plus, then we wouldn't have the benchmark, because that was pulled from somewhere else, right?
Unless. I made a note. I'll noodle on it. Thank you. The next sections are the discrimination sections. You're not going to see a lot of highlights because they're left essentially the same as last year, and the year before, for that matter. Oh no, the piping was new. No, 2 years ago. So the first section is discrimination among others. So it is asking questions about, have you witnessed or heard about other people experiencing discrimination in Salem? If someone says no to that question 6, then they skip the next couple and just directly to your own experience with discrimination. But if they say yes, then they're asked what type of discrimination, frequency that they heard or witnessed, and then what locations, general, not like this specific doctor's office, but a healthcare setting, a business setting, a government office or agency. So that's kind of the block of questions, discrimination experienced by others. And then the next block of questions mirrors that, but it is about discrimination experienced by you. So you'll see Q10 asked in the past 12 months, have you personally experienced discrimination in Salem, Oregon? People who say no, they skip the next set of questions. people who say yes are asked the exact same questions you saw above around type. And then we have this really kind of elaborate, kind of involved piping, branching thing where if I marked that I've experienced discrimination on the basis of age, like any that I mark in Q11, then I'm asked 12 and 13 for each. So it says you marked, you've experienced discrimination on the basis of age, how frequently and in what settings. And if that's the only one I marked, then I move on. But if I marked 5, then it's going to come up, you marked language spoken, you marked gender identity, and I'll be asked that frequency and setting question for each of those. We've talked about it, it's a little complex. The reality is that because some people say no, they've never experienced discrimination, they skip over all of this. Some people say they've experienced one type and then they just see those 2 questions. And I think, to be honest, the people who are saying yes, like they probably want to tell us. So, and we want to hear it. And we've already built in the piping, branching. So even though I've kind of wondered, is it complex? As long as it is actionable to you as a commission, my recommendation is that we continue to ask it.
We talked about how the LGBTQ plus committee uses this data. And so I think in our small meeting, we talked about keeping this because it is useful as data collection, especially for that group. And could be also for the disability task force and other ways that we want to split the data this year. So I believe, Marianne, that's kind of where we settled was, yes, it's still valuable and helpful.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Kate. Okay, so that brings us to the section on bias crimes. Checking for hands. We're good. Okay, so bias crime, then we have this definition. Last year, we asked if you were the target of a bias crime, how comfortable or uncomfortable would you be in reporting it to the Salem Police Department? This year, we talked about adding a question or 2 to not just talk about the Salem Police Department, but to talk about or ask about reporting to the City of Salem Human Rights Commission. And as I was thinking about that question, and if people are comfortable versus uncomfortable and why they might say, I was like, well, somebody might say, I don't know very much about the Human Rights Commission, or I don't know how to report it, or I don't know like who is on that and if I would trust them, or like, is there an online form, or could I do it anonymously? And suddenly I was remembering that last year, even around the questions for the police department, where we had used this comfortable and uncomfortable, the students had come with some discussion around like the comfortable and uncomfortable question. What people were typing in was really intertwined with if they were likely or not to report. And so some of the open ends, when we asked, are you comfortable or uncomfortable? People would say, well, it doesn't matter if I'm comfortable or uncomfortable because I'm not going to report because they're not going to do anything. Or someone would say, well, you know, I would be comfortable, but I'm not going to report. Or I would report and I would be uncomfortable, but I would do it. And I felt like before people could really talk about if they were comfortable or uncomfortable, they wanted to establish how likely they were to actually make a report. And I think if we have them say, yes, I'm likely, or no, I'm likely, and then tell us why, we might hear about some specific barriers. It might be because I'm uncomfortable. But those barriers might be more actionable to you as a commission to say, we're hearing from a lot of people that they want to do it anonymously. I don't know, I'm just making this up, or that they aren't comfortable, or the hours don't match. So my suggestion, and what you'll see here in yellow, is these 2 pairs around likely or unlikely, and explain it to the Salem PD, and then likely and unlikely, and explain it in reporting to the City of Salem Human Rights Commission. And that pair of questions around reporting to the City of Salem Human Rights Commission, that pair is new. And feeling like, hey, well, we're asking about reporting a bias crime. Salem PD has been a wonderful partner in this. You know, the idea was, hey, maybe we ask something about this. And I'm like, we're not asking that unless they're comfortable with it. And they wanted it in there, and Gretchen did reach out to them this year. And they said, yes, we want that question, that pair of questions asked again. So I guess my comment or my question to the committee is, how do you feel about adding? If you're a target of a bias crime, how likely would you report to the City of Salem Human Rights Commission? And how do you feel about shifting from a comfort, uncomfort to a likely and unlikely, and what makes you more or less likely? Thoughts, comments?
I think it's a good thing, because just like what you were saying has come up before, just like in other meetings, where if, I don't know, say an officer says you have to give your name to make a report versus being anonymous, and everyone's like, okay, we're not gonna do that. And then they're reluctant to make reports, so they may feel more comfortable speaking to Gretchen and being like, can you not tell anyone about this?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah.
Thanks, Lee. Other thoughts on that?
I'm happy to include it. I think after, if we had the ability to add like a little blurb either there or at the end of the thank you message, I would, and maybe you have it, Marianne, if you want to scroll down a little bit, I would say that we should give them the 3 ways that they can report, and just do a quick like 1 sentence, like reiterate that here are the 3 ways that you can report bias crime or any discrimination, which I guess with the police you wouldn't necessarily call if it was just discrimination. So we should just clarify, but like it's the county, right, Gretchen, it's county, the city, and then the police. And then if you're a student,
I would have said the state of Oregon and then the city and the police. And then go ahead, I didn't interrupt you about, like, people may also have processes available to them at their schools or places of employment.
yeah, like I know Willamette has their own process as well, so we don't have to get in the weeds with that, but after we ask the questions, we might want to give them more information about how to contact us. So I don't know if we want to do that there or at the end, but.
So what I pulled here is from what we circulated in hard copy, and it was just a thank you. But last year, and I'm really glad you mentioned this, the electronic version, we did have a link to the Human Rights Commission website. So after people finished the survey, if they wanted to come read more about the Human Rights Commission, they could click on the link. So we could have a link, or we could say, you know, here's ways you can report. Sometimes with the survey, you want to be careful that you are asking questions and gathering information and not educating and marketing. And there's actually an ethical question around, they call it sugging and frugging, selling under the guise of research or fundraising under the guise of research, that it looks like you're doing a survey, but it's really just an excuse to give people information that you're not using, but they're telling you as much as you are using it to disseminate. So I'm comfortable having a link, maybe not comfortable having an essay at the end, but if you said, hey, you know, here's a couple ways and where you could do it, or here's a link to our page and those ways were listed on your page. But I think it's a great opportunity as people are going through, and maybe it does raise some questions like, oh, I want to know more about that, that we provide them a resource. Yeah, Judy.
So I like likely. I think that's a good
Great.
change. My only question would be Salem PD. So if you get someone who's really analytical and they don't live within city limits, they would be like, well, I can't report it to the city police department, so I'd be very unlikely, you know, instead of, you know, Marion County or whatever. So could we change that to authority, or I don't know, something different?
If I may, Judy, one idea might be if you were the target of a bias crime in Salem, would
There
that fix that? You know, because even if like they live in Dallas, if the crime happened in Salem,
While they're here shopping,
Right.
working.
then SPD would be the thing.
Then that would be, yeah, that would be perfect.
That might be a way to do it,
Yeah, I like that.
Mhm.
because that's a good point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, great improvement. Thank you. Okay, and then that brings us to the final section, and it's demographics. We are labeling it this year about you so that we can put this question 18 in it. I'll show you the questions we deleted out, but it was in a different section with some other questions. But wanting to still ask, how did you find the survey? It's helpful for us to be able to know how people are getting it, but also we can slice and dice the data and just be able to compare like Facebook, the first group, the Facebook, Instagram, website, or emails responders year on year, if that's useful. But so asking, how did you find the survey? That question is worded exactly how it was in past years. It's just in a little bit of a different place. And then the other demographic questions are worded the same. So you'll see a gender identity, a race, ethnicity, what languages you speak with your family. And Gretchen, if I can ask you to scroll down.
Yes, thank you.
And then I'm on 22, LGBTQIA community. Do you have a disability? Have you experienced homelessness? And then we have concluded. Yeah, please.
I do have a question about 23. Would it be possible to add in there that disability includes, you know, like also, you know, both physical and mental disabilities? Because I feel like some people probably just read disability and they think just physical disability. And so somebody might have, you know, like a developmental disability and might not check that box because they don't necessarily have physical impairment.
Yeah, I think that's great. We had talked about in the past, instead of just a yes or no, having types of disabilities, and it got really complex really quickly. So having, do you have a disability in parentheses includes physical and or mental disabilities, or you can help me get the language right. I'm very comfortable adding something to the question. I would be open, but would need assistance if we wanted the answer options to people. Now, we do ask people when we're asking about the types of discrimination they've experienced to separate mental disability and physical disability. So we could have mental and physical and none, and people could mark all and apply. So yes, but I would look for assistance from folks around this table, including the folks on Zoom. I count you around the table, the virtual and the hybrid table.
What if we went with physical disability? So I do like the idea of being able to check boxes.
Okay.
What if we went with physical disabilities, sensory disabilities, cognitive and intellectual disabilities, psychiatric and neurological, and then chronic and systemic?
And it's multiple choice. Like literally, I think there's instances where like you can have multiple, so it'd have to be multiple.
Yeah, it'd have to be
probably
check all that
multiple,
apply.
Yeah. We could also just create one and then it just says multiple, so then, you know, but I guess if it's check all that apply, then we'll be able to see those that have multiple.
Yes, and when we do the crosstabs, like with the gender identity question and the race and ethnicity question, we have asked people to mark the one that they most identify with to simplify the analysis for the students. The mark all that apply, like for example, if we want to be able to look at the sense of community question or what % have personally experienced discrimination and compare all the ages, the races, the ethnicities, the way we've done that rainbow chart in the past years, comparing all the subgroups, the check all that apply is very cumbersome in doing that analysis.
Okay.
So if we said with the disability, we will do, for example, we could have physical and mental and none. Like if we had 4 options that pick one, it will make the analysis easier for the students.
I'd be okay with that.
Does that get us, it definitely gets you more information than yes,
Yeah.
no.
I think that's great, because I mean, I think, you know, it'd be helpful to see, you know, all those, you know, look at, you know, some of the work the LGBTQA, you know, task force is doing regarding, you know, like disabilities and the LGBTQA community, like we're like I don't want to say the word assuming, but like we're kind of moving in the direction that, you know, they might be interested more in like mental health care resources, but what if the big thing that people are experiencing, you know, discrimination with and everything is, you know, like they have physical disabilities and they're experiencing discrimination? Well, that's kind of helpful to know, so we're gonna make more informed decisions about the direction that we want to go with.
Great.
I think it was
Okay.
Christina and then Judy. I'm not sure.
I think Judy.
Okay,
but-
I'll go first because Christina's not talking. I do have a question about the languages, but to go back to disability, what do you think about changing that to, do you feel that you have a disability? Because I'm thinking if people aren't diagnosed with a disability, they may not feel comfortable checking that, but they could feel like they have one regardless. I don't know.
I'm comfortable with that. What's most actionable to you all?
You know, I think that's, I'd agree. I think, yeah, that way people aren't having to, yeah, because some people might feel like they do anything, but they don't have, you know, like an official diagnosis, and, you know, people could interpret that as, you know, an official diagnosis on their record.
Okay,
So,
noted. Great. And then languages.
So why were these languages chosen?
Great question. So we actually went to the Salem Kaiser School District's website, and these are the languages the Salem Kaiser School District translates all their materials into.
Oh,
So we have used the school district as our guide here.
interesting. Okay, okay. Thank you.
Great. The very last question is 25, and it's an open end, and it just is kind of like, do you have anything else you want to say? Or do you have a specific suggestion we added last year? Suggest something Salem could do to increase, and last year it was community belonging. This year I'm suggesting the sense of community. I'll tell you, as like a gold standard writing a questionnaire, sometimes people look down on having an open end at the end, like, hey, what else do you want to tell us? What did we miss? What did we not ask? They're like, well, ask what you want to ask. It's been interesting. We had students who said, we want to ask this extra open end at the end. People don't have to type anything, right? It's the last one. We can mark it as optional, and they don't have to answer it. And a lot of people do leave it blank. But we have had people at the end who will say, I was waiting the whole questionnaire for you to ask something about this, or the library is really important to me and I wanted to highlight that, and you never asked about the library. Or people sometimes get a little riled about this particular topic, and there have been people who want to just tell us the whole survey is really stupid and that we should be spending the city's money on other things. I personally feel like adding this, where we give people a spot where they can say, this is what's on my mind that you didn't ask me. Maybe, Gretchen, then you get fewer phone calls, or there's fewer people that go on Facebook and say, this survey is stupid and here's why, because they had a chance to tell the people doing the survey that they thought it was dumb or they thought it was great. And we did actually get some interesting suggestions last year. Yeah, great.
yeah, I was gonna say, I would, you know, if possible, maybe explore a different language to also include, like, this could be, you know, like a location where you feel, you know, like the largest sense of community, because we didn't ask that question in there because
Right.
it could be so hard, but we could offer that as part of this, you know, like maybe they feel the largest sense of community at, you know, a specific park, and they can put, you know, like Bush Park or Riverfront Park, and so maybe something with like, feel free to make a general comment or suggestion, you know, places you feel you know, like a sense of community, or something Salem could do to increase the sense of community. Because in that way it encourages more people, because we kind of lucked out with people, you know, mentioning the library last year. And we've, you know, we've come back to that several times, but, you know, didn't necessarily prompt people to it. And I wonder if even in open-ended, if a prompt about location could.
I like it, and I do feel like the library suggestions last year were useful. I am going back up at the top. We have an open end about what increases your sense of community in Salem. And I wonder if there's, instead of loading the question at the end with like so many directions as somebody could go, I wonder if there's something we put here. Is there a location or event or experience that
Yeah, I wonder
builds
if we
it?
can just put like what locations or events increase your sense of community, and so.
If I
just
may-
get nervous, someone's gonna be like, I hate the such and so store on this corner.
Right.
Then,
Right, I wanted to argue. if
Yeah,
you go
no,
ahead.
same. I'm on your thought process, Gretchen, so you can go.
Well, you're the member though.
I mean,
yeah.
I worry, if we're gonna like target specific places, if people say they don't like this place or they like this one. I don't know, I'm not gonna throw out places because then people are gonna say I said something. But I just worry that then the city gets concerned if someone likes Bush Park but doesn't like Minto Brown Park. I mean, they're both parks, so it shouldn't be a big issue, but I don't know if that could drive a wedge like with the city and with like certain people, like when the results come out. So I just get concerned about that with the city being in a weird place.
I'm gonna add, if you don't mind, to that answer. I think what makes me nervous about prompting or inviting specificity and location is the place in which we're intersecting with the conversation is so limited. Like, we don't get the opportunity to unpack what happened to them at the location of concern and figure out if it's founded or unfounded. So we'll basically have an allegation without the ability to investigate. And then we have to remember that we're in a public record context. So let's say Joe Schmo opens a new business and then somebody says, this business decreases my sense of welcoming, and then that gets published. And then that business is impacted when maybe there was a huge misunderstanding or they typed the name of the business wrong, or we don't have a way to. So I feel worried about prompting location specificity in this context. It's certainly welcome in a report of discrimination because we want to zero in precisely to the location and solve, but I'm worried about the place along the continuum of the conversation, if that makes sense.
so I'm feeling like we leave these two really general.
Yeah.
And then if we scroll back to the end, I am appreciating the, we don't really want to prompt a specific complaint about a specific place, and I will echo in this forum, we're not able to follow up with somebody. I mean, the survey is anonymous and we're telling them, like, your responses are going to be looked at in aggregate. And then if there is something that we're like, oh, now we heard 3 things about, Joe Schmo's new business, but we can't follow up. We can't ask the person for more of those 3 people. And then is there some responsibility? But what do we do about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And, kind of my wheels started turning after Gretchen mentioned that is, like if we, invite location, some people might, sense that, like they don't feel as, much of a sense of belonging at one park versus the other, just due to, like maintenance and, like some parks have paved trails where other parks don't. And, you can't, it's not feasible to, after a survey's, results come in, everything to go pave every path in every park. So, yeah, I would agree. I think if people, Diamond location as being, like a location, anything like, I'm not Diamond, but if somebody, praises location as being a location that, is, sense of belonging, then certainly we lucked out. If people don't, they don't. We didn't invite it, so we can,
That's what I'm thinking.
yeah.
Well, and it is public record.
Yep.
We also have the opportunity for the students to select what they're going to bring forward and put in their reports and put in their presentations, and I can ask them, if someone names a specific location, that they can code that as a park, or they can think of like.
Yeah,
I
like broad
something-
categories instead of like
Right.
naming, but like
Right.
if like, there's a bunch of people that, like mentioned, various different names of parks, and we can just categorize that as a park or,
Yes.
like a library or,
Yes.
public business, and then it can just be
Yes.
any business, like,
Great spaces.
yeah.
Yeah, third spaces.
Yeah.
If everyone else knows what that is. What's your third space? Do you have a third space? Yes.
Just a time check, we have about 3 minutes left, so Miriam, what decisions did you want us to make, or areas did you want us to like provide input on? Because I think we also have to talk about how we're getting the survey out.
Thank you for the time check. I feel like the input has been super helpful. What I want to do is integrate it all and then send it out to you. And I'm just gonna leave the yellow highlights around the sense of community to say, hey, let the students have some final say on that. I'll send it to Gretchen, and Gretchen, I'll ask you to
You bet, of
facilitate the
course.
communication. But if we can be at a point where I can, for example, the likely question on the bias crime, to say, yes, let's go forward, make sure that translation is ready. I feel like pretty much everything that we talked about, we kind of ended at a unanimous, except for the stuff at the beginning that we left some question marks around. But why don't I send it to you, Gretchen? And if somebody's like, hey, I kind of left with this question in my mind, then you can let me know. But what I'm looking for tonight is, besides the stuff at the very beginning, can I get the translations and get the questionnaire programmed? And we'll continue to refine it as we go.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then when does it go out again?
Yes, hey, perfect question. Transitioning to the next point. So the term is April 2nd to June 13th. And so we usually have the students have some opportunities in the first few weeks to learn about the Human Rights Commission, and then we try to finalize the questionnaire. The dates that I would like for it to be in field are Monday, April 21st through Wednesday, May 14th. So that's 3.5 weeks. But Kate, transitioning to partners and getting the word out, any kind of events, communication efforts that you guys can do, that's the window, April 21st to May 14th. And preparing folks and being ready to help get it out. And students last year had really positive experiences, coming to events and supporting folks. So if you're aware of things that are happening in that window, I know there were commissioners who helped, but we also sent some students to some things as well.
Okay, so one thing I was thinking about is, Gretchen, we have that long list of organizations and community partners. So we also have, I believe, almost, not completely, but almost all new commissioners. Majority of us are. So one of the things we should do potentially offline before our next HRC meeting is take a look at, or send that list out, and then get feedback on which organizations we may want to add based on connections, or what might be missing, or any organizations we added last year that we want to reach out to again.
Copy.
So we can do that. And then I think we need to pick days. I don't think we've done this yet. Pick days for info sessions. And then I was thinking we probably need at least 2. Don't think they need to be long. It could be a 15-minute just intro to what we're doing, and then 15-minute Q&A, or it could be 15-minute presentation. I don't want it to be super long because I don't want to lose people, but a quick information session and then some Q&A about how they can get this information out. And then we might even want somebody who's been a great partner in the past to provide some insight, like, hey, this is how we've done it. Robert, I think you and I both reached out to Center for Hope and Safety last year, but they might be a good partner if you have a good contact. Or maybe it was Kelsey too. I think like half of us have connections there, but they have like a newsletter, right? And they are great at getting the word out.
On that point, Beebold Street Ministries several times a year put together some big kind of like resource events. They get resource providers from all over the city and everything, really to kind of just connect with individuals experiencing homelessness. And those events are usually attended by hundreds of individuals experiencing homelessness in the city of Salem. And so I was going to reach out to them and see if they would be interested in putting on an event in during the survey window. They wouldn't necessarily, it would draw those people in there, and then we could identify some volunteers that'd be interested in just kind of walking around, interacting with individuals and conducting the survey. But it'd be kind of a, a spot to, draw people into. So, if everyone's okay with that, I can reach out to my connections. That way you can see if we could plan like a big kind of resource event.
Of course.
I had
that'd be
also
great.
wondered, Robert, Salem Housing Authority does their share events,
Yes.
and they said they did one per quarter, and
yeah.
they did one the end of January. So their next one might fall.
Yeah, so I was kind of.
I don't know.
Yeah,
If
and.
Be Bold and Share probably don't want to happen the same week.
No, and they normally do theirs at, Walsh. That might be, a way to connect, different groups. The other option to that too is also looking at some of those individuals that signed up to do the point in time count that, selected a weekend availability, but might not have been able to participate just due to certain count dates, like formal count dates being canceled, that, we could reach out, that information still available to some individual. We could reach out to those individuals and kind of, hey, we've got this other opportunity coming available. Would you be interested in, going out and doing the survey? And I'd be happy to kind of put together kind of like a deployment methodology for volunteers for one weekend day, kind of a gathering spot and sending people out and
Thank
that
you.
pit count
Can
fashion.
be awesome.
Yeah, so in the meantime, I think brainstorming and everybody thinking through like a list of exactly like that, what community organizations like Celine, I think we have on our agenda, like neighborhood associations, right? Peace walks, things like that. If those are already happening, then maybe we each kind of go to one and ask if we can poll people or something like that, or hand out like a little QR code with the survey on it. So we can brainstorm, and I think we can do that offline. So I know we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So if everybody wants to send those ideas, Gretchen, would you like them to send them to both of us? And that way we're both catching them, or I don't know if everyone has my email.
And you're so busy. I don't mind receiving them and compiling them. And I can also, to your point, send out, we had a list compiled last year. I can, in addition, send that out. So maybe no wrong answer. Send your ideas and also update the document for us. Because I think it's in Google, so people could go in and add.
Okay, so we'll send out the list to everyone on the HRC, and we'll ask for a call for if you know of any events or community events happening, or there's potential to launch a community event to align with that window, which was April 21st to May 14th. Yeah.
May 14th.
So then the last thing is, what are we going to actually present? And I was supposed to put it together, a presentation, which I did not. I've been living in PowerPoint this week, which it's only Monday, last week too, I guess. But in that PowerPoint presentation, I was thinking we could show a historical data over time of how many responses we've received. So that might be helpful information, what we do
Okay.
with the information. And so maybe Robert, since you have probably the most historical or longest historical knowledge on the commission of this, and you were the chair before, I think we can set up some time to talk through it, or like what you would put in the presentation.
Yeah.
But I can work with you or work with you and Gretchen on like an outline, and then we can present it in the next HRC meeting.
Perfect.
And I would not do more than 45 minutes for a session with partner organizations. So
Yeah.
I think that's plenty of time. Okay. Next on the agenda is, well, going back to that, we definitely need dates. So I don't know if we want to do a poll, Gretchen. Sorry to keep adding things to the list, but
It's
do we
okay.
want to do a doodle poll on which date, like even a lunchtime? Because if people are on the clock, like maybe a Friday lunch or a Monday lunch or something would be one option, and then an after work 6 p.m. option, 7 p.m. option. But I think dates and times for that partner session would be helpful.
Clarification, Kate, would I doodle poll to you all as people who are going to participate in that? And then we would set them around your schedules and just send them out to the larger group of potential participants?
I think so. I think we'd want commissioners there
and definitely Mary Ann. I would say having Mary Ann there would be key. There will be a lot of questions about the survey.
If we,
Are they all just on Zoom? Or-
I was gonna,
Yeah,
We can
Yeah.
do Zoom only.
if
Yeah.
we do them via Zoom, can't we broadcast them to YouTube? Like if we use, like, even though it's not an official meeting, could we
Yeah, I don't see
broadcast the
why
info
not.
sessions?
I can't
Because then
think of
that
why
way
not.
they would be linked to the channel and then people could go
Mhm.
back and watch
Yep.
them. So if they weren't able to see them, we could just be like, hey,
Yeah,
you know, follow this link.
Yeah.
Watch
Yep.
the recorded sessions.
yep.
and we can send out an email recap afterwards with the link and everything in it.
Yeah,
And any
because
materials like our social media.
Because I think some organizations might just have one representative that attends that, but then they might have multiple staff that would be working with individuals to, you know, do that. So they can, you know, encourage their staff to, you know, if they're gonna be working with folks, hey, watch this to learn more about the survey
Yeah.
and then.
I like
Who
it.
does the social media, who did the graphics last year, by the way?
Do the what?
The graphic design, there was like a couple of graphics that went with the survey. Was that the city?
I
The City
actually,
Communications Department.
I
does
think so
that.
too. I think Kathy on our communications team did them.
Okay. Yeah, we should get that again. I don't know what
I
that
will check
process
with
is. Okay,
They're shorter capacity than normal, but I can sure ask.
And then is it? only
worst case
students
scenario,
Access to like the link?
worst case scenario, I can do it in Canva.
Copy.
Link with people to do the survey? Okay.
Lastly, we had engagement activities
I
on
have
here.
it
I think
on
we're
me,
gonna
too.
pause those for now.
Yeah,
Sorry, Elaine.
do survey stuff.
Awesome.
Selena's saying she has an event
Yeah.
during the time window.
Yeah,
Okay.
I found one. There's the kids clothing swap at Center 50 Plus for Highlands Neighborhood Association, and that usually gets pretty good attendance from people from Salem or people that spend time in Salem.
I like it. People who live or spend time in Salem.
Yeah, we usually have a couple partners at that event, so it wouldn't be weird to have a survey.
And then
That's great.
Kate, we missed what you said. Go ahead.
Sorry, Celine, to interrupt you. I just want to say on our agenda we had, because I know we're almost out of time, so we had engagement activities as the next discussion topic. We discussed in our last HRC meeting that we're going to table that for now and that we're going to focus on engaging with partner organizations. And so I would recommend or propose, I don't think it's an official motion, but I would propose that we each just start the conversations with the groups that we're in, our communities of belonging, and start to have those conversations to let them know this is coming, and then promote the info session when we have that. But we're not officially engaging right now. And then the last thing is member remarks and announcements, just rushing through this, but we have a couple minutes left if anybody has anything to add.
Nothing, all right?
Christina or Judy, thank you for joining us. Please come back again to our engagement meeting. It's very helpful and you had great input. So, all right. And Celine, we made quorum. So thank you as well. And thanks everybody for coming. And Mary Ann, thank you so much for all of your hard work. So I know that you've been working on this a lot.
Thanks for the partnership.
We really appreciate it. So, all right, that's it. And do I have to make a motion to adjourn?
You do not have to. You can just adjourn.
We can adjourn then. Have a good evening, everyone.